What we really wanted to do when we started Morpho is to move away from the central planning of having one governance controlling all the risk management for a free market. The interest in crypto as a technology to replace centralized infrastructure has grown a lot. The most scalable and most interesting value that is created in the Web3 protocol is the value of the state, the value of connecting people with one another.
What's the hardest decision that you've had to make while building Morpho, and how did you come to having to make that decision, or how did you reason about it? I'm here with Paul, who's the co-founder and CEO of Morpho Labs. Morpho is a decentralized lending platform that has really captured a lot of the attention in lending and borrowing on Ethereum. So today we're going to be chatting with Paul about a whole bunch of things, including the recent Morpho Blue, which I guess now Morpho Markets, which has been around for some time, the activation of token transfers, and a whole bunch of other stuff. So thanks for coming on, Paul.
Hey, thanks for having me.
And it should be noted that I am a small angel investor in Morpho. But with that out of the way, yeah, how you been? How's your holidays been?
No, it's been awesome. I just spent two months in the US, in New York and then in Florida, and it was really awesome to meet the community there. The energy is really incredible. Is really really impressive.
Yeah, what like it's sometimes a bit surprising to me that you still live in France, that you haven't moved to the US or like some other place. How do you feel about? Do you still feel bullish about sort of building in France and kind of committing to being a French builder?
Yeah, I think the secret about France is that we have amazing engineers. We don't we don't always have the best growth or product or marketing people, and of course we also have excellent talents in this category as well. Even though more generally you find them in the US, but engineering wise, we have a lot of talent, and specifically we have connections in the space to source great talent, and so we've been happy with friends so far, but obviously more and more I spend time, internationally at conferences, but also specifically in New York. And we have more and more people working for Morpho from New York. Actually, six maybe now, seven maybe.
It's team now.
We're like 40 maybe, something like. Uh, Slowly but surely scaling a bit the team, which is not something you see too often in DeFi, frankly. Teams always remain small,
Yeah.
but I want to take the challenge of scaling. I want to do more in general with Morpho, and it's just at some point it takes to add more people to the team, and yeah. So we're scaling a bit. We're actually recruiting a lot.
Yeah. Well, it's been a hell of a journey. I mean, I was thinking about this earlier. Like we first met at a small meetup in Paris, and you were still in school, and I don't know, there was maybe like 20 people there, and you were pitching the Morpho idea, and like it's so nuts to like think of your trajectory as a founder, and specifically like as a very young founder. This is like your first gig out of college, right? And you
But I actually had other gigs at college, in college,
yeah, yeah.
but they were very very small, and none of them were successful. But yeah, in my second year, I got to start Morpho and was pitching the idea. Actually, the four co-founders of Morpho were still in their second year of university when we started, and Mathis finished last year, and I finished a year and a half ago, approximately.
You were still in college while like building this multi-billion-dollar company.
Yeah, so the fun story is that we raised, I think, 1.3 million in our second year.
Yeah.
We did not drop out. We raised 18 million with Andreessen Horowitz and Variants in our third year and last year, and we still did not drop out. We wanted to go to the end, and we finished few months after. So that was fun. Yeah, and usually US people don't comprehend this. Like they don't understand. They're like, what do you do?
Yeah, like I think it's really just a testament to the French mentality. That, like you have to finish college.
That's exactly.
College is everything. The school you went to, your diploma. Like at some point, if you're down and under and you don't have like any money left, at least you'll be able to get a good engineering job at like Sanofi or
Yeah,
Safran's.
exactly. Exactly right. It's just and by the way, I can't explain why we did this except that we were completely brainwashed, when we were younger,
Yeah.
and so we could not like just do it. So whatever. In retrospect, maybe we should have directly gone, but now it's kind of a cool flex to say that among the 3 years at Morpho, like we spent two at university.
Yeah, yeah, that's great. Yeah, you can say like I at least I have a college degree.
Yeah.
No, cool. So like this is the first time we've talked about Morpho here on the Interop. Like you've been on Epicenter before, so I think people can. But that was a while back actually. So that was like I think you were still. This was before Morpho Blue, perhaps, or just where.
Yes. Yes, it was.
So like the protocols changed a lot now. From the old days of the Morpho Optimizer, which were essentially kind of like a P2P layer on top of Aave and Compound, now to like Morpho Markets being its own standalone product. And in fact, the optimizers are now being deprecated, I think, right? Um,
Yes.
so, for people who are coming to this, like, not really understanding Morpho or maybe not understanding how it's different, like, how is it so different from other lending markets and the predominant sort of model of over collateralized lending, the sorts of like Aave and Compound and others.
Right. So yeah, as you described, like we first started with Morpho Optimizer, which was built on top of Aave, built on top of Compound, and essentially was providing better interest rates than Aave and Compound with the same liquidity and risk guarantees because we're building on top of them and building this matching engine that could essentially provide competitive rates. And by doing so, we realized that it was actually very hard to build large scale applications on top of Aave and Compound, etc. We were the biggest user of Aave and the biggest user of maybe not Compound, but like we had $2 billion deposited in those lending protocols. So that was huge. And the reason we decided to go for another kind of protocol is because we could see as the biggest user the limits more than anyone else. And it was pretty clear that you had at least three of them: resiliency, efficiency, and scalability. And so resiliency was very simply put, um, we had to do a lot of war rooms, right? Like whenever you had like a stable coin depegging or a risk parameter that was not correctly set in one of those underlying pools, well, it's a mess. Like the protocol gets paused. Like what we came to realize is that the way we think about an RV or a compound is that it's a fund, right? You deposit your money and they're going to manage it in a more or less decentralized way. So you have like actual human beings involved behind the scenes that are going to tweak the risk parameters every day, that are going to pose the protocol when there is a problem, that are going to change the code when they need to change the code to add new features, or remove bugs, etc., etc. So you can think of it as a broker, but decentralized, right? It's really what it is. And as builders on top of those protocols, we felt like what we needed is not a decentralized broker. What we needed is an actual protocol, something like Uniswap, right? That is fully permissionless, where we don't have to trust anyone but the code. It won't change. It's completely immutable, and we can permissionally use. And trading, thanks to Uniswap, was like this. It was not the case of lending. And so Morpho Blue and like the next version that we built was actually inspired by that idea that we should build something that's completely permissionless, that's completely decentralized, such that builders like us, like we were on top of Aave and Compound, could feel confident owning their own lending and borrowing use cases, right? So you can think of Morpho more as B2B2C, where we provide infrastructure for anyone to create their own lending and borrowing use cases, and then people can build on top of this like Morpho building block and provide their lending and borrowing services that are very similar to Aave or Compound. So on Morpho you have lending and borrowing use cases that look very similar to what you have on Aave and Compound. Some of them are much riskier, some of them are much safer, some of them are have different compliance, restrictions. So anyway, you think of Morpho as a toolbox for anyone to build their lending protocols rather than an actual fund like
Yeah.
what Aave is.
Yeah, the way I see it is like Aave is a lending product, and the most simplest way is like Aave is a lending product, and Morpho is a lending protocol, and
Yes,
the distinction is very might seem quite small, but it's actually quite important. And the lending protocol allows you to build on top of it, and that's really the main difference, and it allows you to create an ecosystem and a market like small like kind of a big M market of actors that are participating in the market. And whereas Aave, for all its like for all its value in the ecosystem, I think like Aave is extremely valuable. I use it, and it's a product that acts as a broker in between all of these different people who are providing liquidity.
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's like a full stack protocol, a very big monolith that is going to handle everything from the code to the risk management to the product experience, etc. And everything in like one big, very complex module that's going to handle everything for the user. Morpho is more built in layers where you have the Morpho like markets. On top of that, you have Morpho vaults to do risk management that are done by the risk curators that are external to Morpho. Those are permissionless. Anyone can come in and build their own Morpho vaults. On top of that, you have like the user experience layer with what we call the Morpho bundlers, etc., etc. So yeah, much more layered and infrastructure-based approach rather than a big monolith.
Yeah. So I'd like to spend a bit of time on the curators here because I think like they play a very important role in the system, and I have a few questions about how that like role came to be. But perhaps just before we get into that, like explain what is the role of a curator, and how are they interacting with the protocol, and like are they a customer of Morpho, or are they like a user of Morpho that have their own customers? Or how do you define that relationship between like the lenders, the borrowers, the curators, and Morpho?
The most important layer of Morpho is called the Morpho markets. So you can think of it as Uniswap markets, but for lending. So Morpho market would be one collateral asset, one loan asset, and risk parameters. So it could be like BTC, like WBTC to borrow USDC with a given oracle at a given liquidation loan to value. That would be one market, and that's completely immutable, and can be permissionlessly created. Anyone can create such market, right? Extremely simple code as well, like just 600 lines of code, and that will remain forever like this, right? And so because it's permissionless, you have a lot of those different markets. You have STEs to borrow USDC, WBTC to borrow USDC, etc., etc. You have a lot of them. So that makes it a bit complex for the user, right? Liquidity seems fragmented. Yes, there is a lot more use cases, but which market should I be choosing as a retail user? That's a bit hard to find, right? And so this is why we have on top of those markets, Morpho vaults, right? And those Morpho vaults are essentially run by what we call curators, where they welcome the deposits, say USDC deposit, the same way Aave would be welcoming USDC deposits. And then it selects which market is going to allocate liquidity to. So let's say Gauntlet or Stakehouse or Block Analytica, etc. Those are like risk experts in the field that are going to run their own Morpho vaults, and let's say it's a USDC vault, they're gonna welcome some deposits in the vault and generate some yield by allocating it to the Morpho market. So essentially, vault creators are here to do the work of selecting, what is the correct oracle, what is the correct liquidation loan to value. If there is a big dump in the market, to be able to reallocate liquidity quickly and essentially do risk management, such that the end user does not have to do it, right? And so the main difference with Nave is that risk management is not enshrined in the markets of Morpho. Morpho markets are immutable. Risk management is externalized in the Morpho vaults. And so Morpho vaults select which markets is relevant for them, right? And so yeah, so that's how the protocol is segregated essentially.
Yeah. So is a curator role a consequence of how the protocol was designed, or was it intentional? Like, did you guys think that this curator role would emerge and sort of planned it that way, and have this this idea that it would become professionalized and or was it just sort of happenstance that like because of the way the protocol was designed, these players came into the market and filled the gap with that
Right.
need?
So yeah, it was, it was kind of planned all along. Like what we really wanted to do when we started Morpho is to move away from the central planning of having one governance controlling all the risk management for a free market. Downside of a free market is that it's hard to interact with, right? There's a lot of like dimensions that you have to control. And as soon as you have those dimensions, well, there is no other option but to introduce layers of abstraction. And when you have those layers of abstraction, you need prosumers and consumers, right? And so our prosumers, which are kind of like the B2B2C approach of Morpho, are the creators. And so the reason we built the Morpho vaults and with the way we build them, they can generate their own revenue. They have different roles. We even have an interface for vault managers to like build their own vault and create their own vault, etc. All of this was built for them to run actual businesses, right? And today, if you look at like Gauntlet, for example, or Steakhouse or MEV, Capital, etc., they actually generate a lot of money. Like I think Gauntlet now is at like 5 million annual recurrent revenue. MEV Capital is higher than that now. I think Maker is around 50 million. So like all those players on top of the Morpho ecosystem, we don't pay them. Like we, they don't have to be friend with me and or the DAO in order to get a payment from the DAO. They get paid, through a fee switch that they own in their vault, right? And so it was all very intentional to create this ecosystem of players that can actually generate money so that they can reinvest into growing their vaults even more, discovering new use cases, building tooling for Morpho, et cetera, et cetera.
Mm. So the fee switch is at the vault level?
Right. So there
Interesting.
are two fee switches.
Yeah.
You have one at the market level that is owned by the DAO, so by the Morpho DAO, and one at the vault level, right, which is owned by the risk curator or the vault owner, essentially. And those are two fee switches for two very different services. One is more of a management fee. You pay someone because you're not active, you're a passive user. You don't want to do risk management, right? You want someone to, be here 24/7 to actually manage your money and make sure you to optimize your risk reward trade off. So that's the Morpho Vault fee switch, right? On the Morpho market fee switch, the value that is created by the market is actually very simple. It's bringing together lenders with borrowers, right? So when you use the Morpho markets, the reason you use the Morpho markets and not the fork of the Morpho markets is essentially because it has a state. It has a lot of like, it's connecting opportunities, right? And the value of connecting opportunities is the value of the network, right? And so very fundamentally, by the way, I think this applies to like every single Web3 protocol. Like the most scalable and most interesting like value that is created in the Web3 protocol is the value of the state, the value of connecting people with one another. And so yeah, in the case of Aave, they charge a fee for the two services at the same time. The value of the state. Okay, why don't you use the Nave fork? You use the main Aave instance because it has more liquidity. You can borrow more, you can lend more, etc., etc. But also for their management, such that they can pay their consultants that are going to work for them and update the parameters of the protocols. In Morpho, we segregate the two different business models. The main difference here is that it's open now. So like, there is open competition. There is competition for Steakhouse and Gauntlet and MEV Capital to like play on fees to, minimize the cost for the user. It's not one central planning that you have to trust to charge like a relevant fee.
And the fee switch,
A free market.
so the fee switch at the protocol level, at the Morpho DAO level, that hasn't yet been activated.
No, it's not been activated. Uh, it's for different reasons. So first, like there are a bunch of legal implications behind activating a fee switch.
Of course.
And we want to make sure that, we cover like all of them properly in before activating the fee switch. And, that's been the case on other DAOs. Make sure like, everything is actually safe and sound for like all the stakeholders. So that's one. Another interesting fact about the Morpho protocol fee switch is that we've tied the license to the fee switch. So essentially, the Morpho code is BSL, so you can't fork it until we activate the fee switch. So the second we activate the fee switch, it turns open source. And the reason why I wanted this to be is because we're not a SaaS business. We don't create value from the code. We create value from the state. So if you're not happy with paying a fee with the Morpho code, and if the state is not valuable to you, then you can actually fork the protocol and build your own thing. If the state is valuable, if you need to meet lenders that you would not have met otherwise, or borrowers that you would not have met otherwise, then you should be happy to be charged the fee, right? And so yeah, so that's why it's a bit special, but I'm very happy about it. And by the way, I think it will become more and more common in the DeFi space.
So once the fee switch is activated, then the code becomes open source. And I understand that for a DAO, there's some regulatory and legal implications to activate the fee switch. But for the curators, because the difference there is that they're a kind of registered business that can justify this fee, and they can be regulated or fall within like some regulatory framework. Have jurisdictional, how is that different between the DAO and the curators?
Yes. So it's a good question. So first, there is a ton of like regulatory consideration when activating the fee switch. For example, the tax consideration, like if you activate a fee switch, who's paying tax? Is it the token holders, or is it like not considered like a taxable event? Which jurisdiction should collect the taxes, et cetera, et cetera, which is not something you would have if you're centralized curators. Some curators are decentralized as well. Like some curators could be DAOs, right? So they might have similar problems, et cetera. And you have a tax implication, you have regulatory concerns, you have money laundering concerns, like all those problems that you can have in DeFi. There is also an impact on the qualification of the project, of the token, et cetera. So I won't go through all the problems that you have when turning on the fee switch. And so like generally at Morpho, we've been on the conservative side here and really want to try to understand like what's going on before moving forward, because it could have like big implications. And also like truth is also that we've raised like 50 million recently. The project does not need immediate funding in order to like continue. We could like the Morpho protocol now has close to $6 billion of TVL and is generating a ton of money through like all the creators. So we could absolutely get some money from the fee switch. It's just that we want to do it right at the right time, and also want it to be like a community driven decision, etc., etc. On the creator side is very different. Every creator is an owner of its own, like it's their own decision to make with their own like regulatory and reasoning. And so some are based in different jurisdictions as well, so they may have different restrictions on that front.
Yeah. Okay. And so what is the model through which we should evaluate the trust in a curator? Because like you create this market, right? And you like right now, I think the curators are like fairly well-known actors in the ecosystem, curating assets that are respected and high quality assets. Now, like if Morpho continues to grow, that might include other assets that fall outside of, say, the kind of crypto assets that we're used to, maybe some RWAs, things like that, where the traceability of the underlying asset may be different, right? The trust model might be different. And so therefore, for curators that are interacting with those, there is a trust assumption that needs to be made in terms of like rebalancing the portfolios of assets correctly so that people don't get liquidated, as far as I understand. So yeah, like with that, how should people kind of evaluate a curator, and what are some of the best practices that like you guys as a team have thought about in terms of how people should interact with them?
Right. A few things. I'd say number one is like the best guarantee you have is the on-chain guarantee. Like I'd say like on Morpho, like the Morpho vaults like gives you a set of like important guarantees with regard to like time locks under which like curators can take actions, who can veto this time lock, and can interrupt like the management, etc. So I guess fundamentally risk management has to be controlled and managed by someone. Like risk management is about anticipating the future and minimizing the risk. And so fundamentally, you need an entity, whether it's like more or less decentralized, to perform actions, right? And so the question is like, under which scope can it perform like some actions? In the case of Aave, they have a time lock. it goes through votes. And so as a user, you trust that the processes that they have in place, won't go rogue, and no one is going to buy a lot of tokens, or the multi-sig owners are not going to go crazy and change some things in the protocol that could be critical. In the case of Morpho, we're setup agnostic. So a creator could have a very short time lock because they want to remain nimble and make changes that are critical fast, which could have an incidence in the trust that people have on those projects, right? The problem we have is the readability, right? Like, how do we convey to the user the idea that one setup is safer than the other? As an infrastructure, what's even worse is that we can't have opinions. Like, we can't say precisely, oh, we like RE7 a lot, or we like MEV a lot. We think those are great people, and that they're never going to do a mistake, or we don't know. Like the reality, like, of course we have relationships with all of them, and I personally believe they're completely fine people. But I have no idea if like their setup is like completely safe, etc. So, and same thing with any DAO, right? It could be with the Compound DAO, with the Aave DAO, etc. So what we're looking towards is like providing as much insights as possible through us, scrapping like the data of what is available and providing it in the most digestible way possible, but also working with third parties, experts in risk assessment, and the for example, like the S&P 500, the S&P or the Moody's of the world, those players have equivalents in DeFi and crypto, and they can work towards like assessing the vault, right? For example, and so a vault would pay to be assessed and have a risk rating, for example. So those are like the things we've been working on. Makes it overall much harder because we're an infrastructure. Like, if we had only one vault run by the Morpho team, like what Aave has, the only thing you have to trust is the Aave brand, right? And behind the brand is essentially a proxy for the trusted setup, right? In the case of Morpho, the brand of Morpho is a proxy for the infrastructure, but not for the management, right? And so, yes, you have the brand of Gauntlet, you have the brand of MEV, the brand of RE7, etc. But the reality is that for the users, it's hard to digest, right? So having one single trusted third party, which is the risk raters, like S&P, Moody's, etc., and display like a risk score, for example, could be one solution to approach the problem. And those are like problems we've been thinking a lot like lately.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to approach it. And having, yeah, I think like keeping the Morpho brand separate from the ecosystem players, and so that the curators and like these risk rating participants makes a lot of sense, especially where you're a marketplace. If you look at, say, Amazon, for instance, as a marketplace, well, like Amazon is not responsible for like the products that are being sold to you. Like, if you have an issue, like a warranty issue or any like shipping issue, you typically deal with the shipper, and that's like made clear in the agreement, right? Like the terms. Now, what's sometimes complicated there is that, as you alluded to, like users will confound your brand and the people who are participating in the market, and like keeping that separate, I think, is like one of the biggest challenges that you have. Rank term, yeah.
It definitely is. Morpho should be thought more as a Uniswap, right?
Right.
Where if you interact with Uniswap and buy like a scam token or a token that has a vulnerability in it, you'll get scammed,
Yeah.
right? And Uniswap does not prevent you from doing that, right? However, Uniswap does a lot of work at indexing the prices, making the right warnings in the interface, etc., just to make sure people are aware of what they're getting into.
Yeah.
And by the way, Uniswap does not even have opinions on tokens. Like, they use centralized exchanges, price feeds, those kind of things to add to their interfaces the tokens. And so we have similar concerns with Morpho. It's been tough in the beginning to have people differentiate the two brands, especially because we had players like Aave saying, "Oh, Morpho is responsible for everything that's happening on Morpho." Of course not. Like, the protocol is permissionless, the functions are public. It's pretty obvious that we're Like some worlds will break on Morpho, some markets. The very first market that was created on Morpho when we made the protocol public was a scam market. Like literally seconds after we announced the Morpho, not seconds, but like few hours later, we saw some people creating some fake markets and trying to introduce some scams, right? So yeah, so it's more about like readability and how do you present things to the user.
Yeah. Interesting. So like in November, the token was made transferable. Um, why was that the right time to like? I guess one thing we should talk about is like why you guys took so long to make the token transferable. I think this was like a decision that really falls outside the norm of most protocols that make their token transferable much sooner. I mean, Morpho had been live for several years now. How do you think that has impacted the if you can talk about this the price and like right now we're basically at all-time highs. Do you think that that transferability caused this recent spike in retail interest?
I I don't have answers to anything, everything, frankly, just because I don't know, especially with regard to price action. I Yeah, like I'm not always like fully comprehend like why the price is going one direction or another. However, I can comment on the strategy here and the thinking behind like making the token non-transferable for at least 2 years. It was non-transferable. So the idea was the following: like we think of tokens as a way to bootstrap capital by selling tokens to investors, bootstrap contributions by giving tokens to contributors, and bootstrap usage and network effects by giving tokens to two sides of the market such that the market gets bootstrapped, right, and is actually working properly. um and and doing this from first principles did not require us to make the token transferable. Like doing this only required us to distribute tokens to users, but nothing really actually specified that we should make it transferable, right? And so we did this with Morph Optimizer. And for me, I really wanted to have a very clear long-term vision that was public, which we published like a few months ago, like Morpho's mission and why we're doing what we do and what we should be aiming at like 20 years from now. I really wanted this to be public for any like investor that is from the public that we had not, any touch point directly could actually made like a reasonable investment out of it. So to me, that was like very important to make sure that, the vision was open. And frankly, back in the day, we were still experimenting, right? We were still like figuring out what was the best products, etc. So we did Morph Optimizer. It grew super well. We had like in 2023, we were the biggest growth of the entire DeFi space. But still, I was not convinced just because of like it was built on top of Aave, could not grow bigger than Aave. And we saw all those limits of lending protocols. So I was like, let's just rebuild everything again. And we were right, because today, like, we have almost $6 billion in TVL, a year later. And so as soon as it became clear that we had, bootstrap Morpho, the second version, and that was the way forward, that it was the model that we were going to pursue over the long term, once we had a very clear vision, then we had everything aligning correctly to actually open up to the public, like the token, etc. I will say though that it took some time. Like not everybody like was agreeing in the community with the timeline. So we had a lot of like back and forth and debate for at least like 3 months or something. But eventually, like we the different stakeholders like decided to agree, and we ended up launching the token. And I don't look at the price like every day, but I think so far it's been like doing quite well. And even though I still think that's like short-term price action compared to like the long-term vision of Morpho, I think if we were to do it again, I think we'd do similar.
Yeah, I think that waiting to launch the token was such a great move, and one that I think more protocols should adopt. Right, this position of like basically like launching a token before you have real product market fit and usage of your product like should become the norm. Some of the teams in which we invested, right, as a fund are now doing that, and I would hope to see all more protocols do that. and I think that the ecosystem on the whole will benefit from that sort of thing.
100%. And I would say though that I think tokens are like an extremely powerful tool, like in Web3. Like if you want to get people to do stuff in your project, you can get them to do anything by distributing tokens. And so I think the right mental model is it should be used solely to bootstrap. Like for example, bootstrap things that have network effects. So, for example, in the lending market, you need like the lenders to have bars coming in. So you can use tokens to bootstrap the market. And once the market is bootstrapped, you remove the tokens, right? And you decrease the incentive rates, etc. And so, yeah, I think it should always follow this pattern of like, where are my network effects? Where are my multi-sided markets? And let's try investing some amount of tokens in it to bring players that are fake players, essentially, and then remove the incentives and see if I successfully bootstrap something. And if I did not, then it's probably because I don't have PNF, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So you guys are now doing like a grants program, and there's a few things happening on the governance forum. People should go check that out. So one is this MIP 87, which um, basically approved Morpho to be deployed on like 15 or something chains. So that'll grow the pie, I think, quite a bit in terms of Morpho usage. And there's also this grants program that is calling upon builders to like build new things on top of Morpho. So I'd like to talk about those separately. Maybe we can start with Prop 87. One of the things here that I find interesting is that the deployments, the Morpho deployments will basically be the same, but you're encouraging innovation at the UI level. So what's your philosophy there, and what are some of the things that you're hopeful will happen as you allow like these different communities from these different EVM chains to create the UI and sort of the interface layer between the users and the protocol?
Right. So, few things. First, Morpho is not managed. It's immutable code, so it's very easy for us to deploy in like 20 different chains. Like it only takes like a few minutes to like click deploy and get the smart contract to be on each chain. The reason is because we externalize risk management, right? Like anyone can come in then and build their own lending and borrowing use cases, and so we're doing this and just because it's a way for us for multiple reasons. So first, we've had a lot of like inbound interest from people, obviously chains. Every chain would want like a lending protocol to be deployed on their chain, but also most interestingly from builders. Like people want to build on top of Morpho, and people want to build like their lending and borrowing use cases. And for this, they need the Morpho instance to be available. And so we essentially realized that it was a way for us to strengthen our like developer network, right? Essentially. And so that was a big part of the concern. Also, I was a bit like personally, I I was just also a bit fed up with like some other protocols, like going after huge grants and farming grants from like chains, which I think is like not the way forward in many different ways. And so I was like, hey, let's just deploy everywhere. Like we don't need to farm like a huge grants and squeeze like chains to get as much money as we can from them. And so yeah, so that's also a way for us to compete from strategic point of view, right? So I guess that was the initial thinking, yeah, behind like cross-chain deployments.
And do you anticipate other lending markets will be deploying on some move-based chains? Do you anticipate to fork Morpho in Move or perhaps other languages like Sol, Solana to deploy also over there?
Right. So it's a good question. And by the way, to your point, like this is true. Like soon after we published this proposal, like Aave published that they were going to deploy on more chains, right? Main difference here is that for us, it's very easy to deploy on new chains, right? Like we don't have to manage liquidity across like 50 different chains and employ more people to do so, etc. We can just do this in a very scalable way.
Yeah.
And the only thing that is not scalable, and I want to and the reason why we've not proposed anything to go to the SUI, like whatever, like Move or SVM worlds, is we have such a like it takes so much time for us to actually come up with secure and secure smart contracts, that we want to make sure that the things that we ship are like completely reliable, and it's very hard for us to divide focus of our development teams for other languages. Not to say it's impossible,
Yeah.
but just saying that the cost is huge and the risk is almost as huge as it is. So we have one of the best Solidity developers in the world, and we haven't like the actual human resources to work on like those different languages like, yet at the moment. Do not mean we'll never get there. Just saying that.
Given like Solidity is probably like building on SVM or on MoveVM is less of a security lift than building on the.
It is.
And so perhaps
No, that's completely true. Yeah.
yeah.
No, that's completely fair point in the equation of like deciding to move to a new chain or not. Like Solidity is very hard to secure, very very hard, and I think it caused a lot of like problems in the Ethereum community. That's what it is. So yeah, but I think it's more of a matter of focus for us. Like, do we focus on one chain or the other? And yeah.
Well, I would love to see you guys deploy in Movement, because Movement is going to support EVM smart contracts out of the box. So
Yeah, EVM we can do.
I'm happy to help make that happen. If it's not already in sort of in the works. Well, yeah, and then on the other side of things, like on this grants program, what are some of the most exciting things you're seeing there?
Have to be frank, I did not look into it. Like, so I don't know.
What are your hopes? Like, what do you hope people will build? Like, if there was like your wish list of like top things that you would love people to build, what would
Right. So first things first, I think grant programs are a trap for DAOs. Like, it's very easy to give away a lot of money that is not well invested.
Yeah.
Like, we're not VC investors, right? Like we don't do like like being a VC is a job, right? A full-time job, and creates like huge companies, etc. So I don't think grants should be used to fund relevant businesses building around Morpho. So I think the objective function here is more what kind of open tooling that is going to benefit the entire stack. That is, oftentimes, most oftentimes like going to be like a public good that anyone can reuse, and it's just going to empower and make the network more valuable overall. And this is more how I think about grants, that they should serve like to fund more public goods that are open and reusable by the entire stack, rather than trying to fund like new businesses, etc. Which to me is like is essentially not the job of the Morpho DAO to do this, right? And so what we've done is, okay, this is just a theory. Like in practice, I don't know what it looks like. So I essentially thought that maybe with Kirk, like that is leading everything governance on our end, that it would be better to have a pilot program where we try things out with a budget, and we see where it gets, right? So we don't have big principles yet on how the grants program of Morpho should be done. We're just going to experiment, but I'd say the intuition is that we want to be funding public goods rather than companies.
Yeah. Okay. Then I think that's a good approach, like for you guys to, as a DAO, right? I mean, it doesn't make sense for you to try to figure out what the best business model is, but building public goods that other businesses can use and that the Morpho community and Morpho product benefits from, I think like is a reasonable approach. Maybe taking a step back here and looking at the space more broadly. as we near the end here, because I know you've got to go in a few minutes. But do you see fintechs and neobanks adopting DeFi infrastructure in the near future? And perhaps more broadly, what do you think is the institutional DeFi landscape look like for 2025?
It's a good question. 2 years ago, like my interactions were with institutions were more okay. They want to learn and take my time essentially to learn more about DeFi and crypto, etc. And things have changed a lot in the last 6 months. So okay, there is like this election that obviously helped maybe, but even before that, like the interest in crypto and the crypto stack in general as a technology to replace centralized infrastructure has grown a lot, right? And it's been very impressive. So I think if you're a fintech, for example, or if you're a neobank, but especially fintechs or even exchanges, you own a lot the distribution, right? You own an increasingly big share of the financial industry, but you don't own the infrastructure, right? If you're like, Robinhood or Revolut or like, all those big fintechs, they rely on traditional finance to, sell ETFs or to do FX or to do repo or like those kind of things. And so it takes a lot of time for them to be finally integrated, like deep down into the system. But usually they don't own the infrastructure. And when you think about it, DeFi for them is such a nice way to become owner of this infrastructure and shortcut the entire traditional finance system. Like building on chain for them is essentially like we're gonna provide, not only do we own the distribution, but we're also going to own the infrastructure. And in order for this to happen, you need DeFi protocols, protocols that are permissionless, protocols that they can, configure and they can, tailor to theirs and cater to their specific use case, to their specific risk, to their specific compliance. And you want resilience, right? You want to own the code, meaning that you don't want the code to be upgradable. You want the code to like, be fully in your control, so immutable. You want to be able to fully control your risk management, your compliance management, et cetera, et cetera. And I do think Morpho is the perfect fit for that, right? Like it's been built intentionally for B2B2C, and I think those players will find like high interest in using the Morpho stack.
And one thing also I wanted to ask you is like a little bit scattered here as we come towards the end because I have so many questions. But like when I first saw you at that first meetup, I believe my recollection was that your position with regards to Aave and was that you wanted to work with them, and there was this idea of sort of like collaborating with Aave to optimize for Aave users to optimize their borrow and lending rates. Has that changed? Is your intention now to displace Aave as the largest as the like leading lending market in crypto?
Well, when we set objectives like in the organization with the contributors, etc., we don't talk about Aave this much, right? Like obviously they're an important part at the site.
I mean, like I don't think about you at all. Like,
Oh, what's that? Oh yeah, yeah. I think I have it, but whatever. And my point is like we when you think about like Morpho's structure and the way incentives are structured in Morpho and the long-term mission of Morpho is actually very different from Aave. Aave is building a great bank for crypto users, and Morpho is building public infrastructure for the entire world to build financing use cases, right? And it's a much bigger market that Morpho is targeting, and much more ambitious roadmap, right? Which forces us to take design decisions, especially going for a free market approach rather than a central planning approach, that Aave would not take with regard to their objectives, with their ambition, etc. So yeah, I think as a function of like the ambition of our mission, of course, like some Morpho vaults, not us directly, but some people building on top of Morpho will outgrow and outcompete Aave, in my opinion. But just because Aave is one specific use case, right? And Morpho is aiming for financing in general,
yeah.
across like all use cases, and of course much beyond like crypto and crypto usage today.
So as we wrap up here, I mean, one last thing, as a founder, I think like we've interacted a couple of times over the last couple of years, and as a founder, I've just watched you grow quite a bit, and it's been really impressive. And I think a lot of people probably have
Thank you.
that same opinion. What's the hardest decision that you've had to make while building Morpho, and how did you um how did you come to having to make that decision, or how did you reason about like that decision?
That's a good question. I wish I could say the hardest decision was sunsetting Morpho Optimizer, which was like a super successful protocol, and yet we decided to completely like deprecate it and to go for something completely new that no one had tested before. In practice, that was not super tough, just because I was like highly convinced that this was the way forward. And so we did not even have many doubts like when going into this. I think the hardest decisions always have to come down to the people. Like, as a startup, you have to maintain a very high talent density, and that's vital for the project to move forward. And oftentimes that means letting go some people that for some reason don't align fully with like the mission, or just the pace and the level of the company. And I think by far that has been like the toughest thing for me as a founder, is like uh dealing with those situations and making sure that Morpho can have like the highest talent density. uh has been very tough personally.
Yeah, I hear that. All right, Paul, thanks so much for coming on. It's been great chatting and catching up, and hopefully we can do this
Likewise.
soon. Cheers.